Even though they are unauthorized, asterisms are an exciting target for astronomers. In the night sky, where there are billions of stars visible from Earth, collecting asterisms offers useful points of reference. And over time, our stories and tales, as well as the things and creatures that make up our earthly life, have influenced this cataloging process, which still only includes a very small portion of the stars in the night sky. There is another visual classification of star configurations, despite the fact that the majority of us are familiar with constellations and their names thanks to the zodiac signs that they belong to. Astronomers are well aware of the significance and allure of these configurations, known as asteroids, despite them appearing less well known to the general population. There are 88 officially recognized constellations, 48 of which, according to NASA, trace back to ancient civilizations such as the Babylonians and the Greeks and even earlier. Later modern constellations were added as humanity's research of the night sky became more accurate. These constellations' names, which correspond to the patterns or images they appear to make, are influenced by our culture. Even while other cultures have given the constellations their own names, Western astronomers are best familiar with the names from Greek mythology. Thus, we have constellations like Orion the Great Hunter, which is named after a Greek mythological character with the blood of the gods coursing through his veins and is made up of stars that create the stick figure of a man holding a sword and shield. The names of the more contemporary constellations come from less fantastical things like animals and tools like peacocks, giraffes, and telescopes. These constellations were discovered by later astronomers of the 1500s, 1600s, and 1700s who could use optical devices to search the skies and had access to the southern hemisphere. The constellations and asteroids are fascinating because they are entirely exclusive to our earthly perspective. The stars of the constellations may actually be separated by great cosmic distances, but they were chosen because of their apparent closeness on the 2D sphere of the sky as it surrounds Earth. For instance, the tiny constellation Triangulum stars are located between 35 and 127 light-years away from our planet. Although the stars and asterisms frequently have this seemingly random connections to one another, occasionally there is more going on between these stars than meets the eye. Asterisms are collections of stars that can be small and simple, with only a few stars, or enormous and complicated, with many of these constellation patterns covering large areas of the sky. According to a previous story from Space.com, stars inside an asterism are often similar in brightness to one another and may be bright enough to be seen with the unaided eye or distinguished with a telescope. An asterism stars may be physically connected to one another or they may be arranged in arbitrary groups. One of the most well-known constellations, the Big Dipper or the Plough depending on the region of the world you live. The Big Dipper is an asterism, not a constellation, and is made up of the 7 brightest stars in the constellation Ursa Major, often known as the Great Bear. The Ursa Major moving group, also known as Colander 285, includes 5 of the Big Dipper stars. This group of stars is the nearest to Earth with similar space speeds that are thought to have a common origin in space and time. However, the stars that make up the coathanger, the primary component of Brachie's cluster or Colander 399, have presented a contentious illustration of the relationships, or lack thereof, between the stars in an asterism. Initially, it was thought that these stars were all a part of an open cluster that had developed from the collision of a single, incredibly huge and dense cloud of molecular gas. They would all be roughly the same age as a result. However, research done in the 1970s found that just 6 of the coathanger's brightest stars were a part of an open cluster. Since 1998, this has undergone multiple revisions, but today there is general agreement that the stars are aligned at random and have no physical connection. The 3 stars that make up the asterism known as the Summer Triangle, which is a vast triangle of stars seen in the eastern sky on summer nights in the northern hemisphere, are also not physically connected to one another. Consideration of asteroids as a subdivision of constellations is ineffective because they may not always be found inside the same constellation. The lozenge is a fascinating case of a transnational asterism. Eltanin, Grumium, and Rastaban, 3 stars from Draco's head, as well as 1 star from Hercules' foot, make up this diamond. It nearly makes one wonder what stories the Greeks may have created if they had discovered this asterism. As with constellations, asterisms are collections of stars that form images of well-known celestial objects. As indicated above, one of the key differences between constellations and asterisms is that the latter are relatively recent, whilst the former frequently date back to ancient times. Like with constellations, their borders are not formally established. A loose grouping of stars that appear to come together to create a picture, figure, or depiction of a known object is thus considered to be an asterism. However, the distinction between constellations and asterisms is something that has only recently been acknowledged as the official borders of the constellations. Constellations and asterisms were not properly distinguished despite humanity's long history of stargazing until far into the 20th century. The International Astronomical Union and Belgian astronomer Eugene Joseph Delport began formalizing the number of constellations and their limits in 1928, which led to the division of constellations and asterisms into their own categories. In their accounts, the ancients left us a star-studded sky divided into asterisms, but without any clear-cut boundaries. Delport stated at the beginning of his report, Scientific Demarcation of the Constellations, which was published in 1930. The accurate demarcation of the constellations is of highest importance for a vast deal of astronomical activity, such as the systematic observation of meteors, the study and denomination of variables, the observation of novae, etc. He continued by outlining why such a delineation was long needed. Asterisms provide astronomers no less fascinating and alluring topics for their observations, even though they are not officially recognized like constellations and their limits are not as precisely defined. Astronomers now use asteroids as crucial instruments because they make clear visual cues for navigating the night sky. Asterisms, which are smaller and less intimidating than constellations, are particularly significant for young and beginning astronomers, guaranteeing that future generations will continue to imagine the cosmos as creatively and imaginatively as our ancestors did. The 7 brightest stars in Ursa Major, the Great Bear, which make up the Big Dipper and Little Dipper in the constellations of and Ursa Minor, are possibly the most well-known asterisms, the Little Bear. These asterisms are easily visible and are clustered together in the sky over the northern hemisphere. The Southern Cross, which is located in the middle of the constellation crux, is a cross or kite-shaped grouping of 4 brilliant stars. Similar to how Polaris is used in the north, this asterism has served as a navigational aid for explorers in the south. Consists of 10 brilliant stars from the Brakes cluster, which was first recognized in 964 AD. The hanger portion of the shape is made up of 6 stars, while the hook portion is made up of the remaining 4 stars. The coat hanger can be seen by skimming between the brilliant stars of Altair and Vega, with the best viewing occurring from July through August. The sky was properly split into 88 official constellations in 1928 by the International Astronomical Union, IAU, who established geometric boundaries that encircled every star within each constellation. Any additional newly chosen star clusters or extinct constellations are frequently regarded as asterisms. Any technical distinctions between the terms constellation and asterism, however, may remain vague depending on the specific literature source. The sky appears to rotate around one single point in the sky to an observer from sunset to dawn. The celestial pole is the point in the sky to which the Earth's axis is directed. The pole star, Polaris, is located quite near the celestial pole in the northern hemisphere. There is no bright star in the southern hemisphere to indicate that position. Circumpolar constellations are those that revolve around the celestial pole but do not set below the horizon at night. In other words, these constellations will never set for an observer. Which constellations are circumpolar depend on where you are on the planet. The northern hemisphere is home to 5 prominent circumpolar constellations: Cepheus, Draco, Cassiopeia, Ursa Major, and Ursa Minor. Crux, Centaurus, and Carina are the 3 in the southern hemisphere. The fact that some constellations appear to herald the beginning of seasons has given them unique significance over the centuries. Ancient peoples used stars or constellations to determine the best times to plant or harvest crops, gather food, or skin animals. Different constellations are visible at different times of the year due to the Earth's orbit around the Sun. For instance, in the northern hemisphere, the emergence of Orion in the morning sky signals the beginning of fall and the impending decline in temperature. A sign of summer is the summer triangle becoming prominent in the northern sky. Since they signal the changing of the seasons, years, and sometimes of life itself, constellations were more than just patterns to ancient cultures. That was for today. Thank you for staying with us. Don't forget to like our video and subscribe to our channel.